that case, I sentence you to a lifetime of horror on Monster Island.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Kaiju Kingdom podcast. I am one of your hosts, Chris Eaton, along with the other host.
Hi, it's me. It's Jessica Sang.
So, if you listened to the first episode where we droned on about our love for monsters, we're actually going to get into some nitty-gritty today. This is a special 2-part episode, kind of like those very special episodes of sitcoms back in the day, where things got real for a little bit. So what we're going to be talking about, though, is the Pacific Rim Blu-ray DVD that came out earlier this month. Jessica has spent the last good portion of a week and a half taking college-level notes on this disc while I sat there and just watched everything. I'm just like, yeah, okay, I'll talk about that. So you're going to hear a professional opinion, and you're going to hear the lazy man's opinion. So we're going to break it down into... How are we going to do this, Jessica? We're going to break it down to 2 discs?
Yeah, we're going to break it down, I believe this is podcast part 1 of the Pacific Rim Blu-ray DVD review, which is the special features discs.
Okay. So...
And then our second one will be what's actually on the Blu-ray movie itself.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who haven't checked your Blu-ray, please look. There is actually 3 discs.
Yeah, I had this. I had this problem the other night. I was we were going to sit down to record this. And you're going over. It's like, well, did you see the bloopers and stuff? I'm like, no. Where the hell is that? She's like, there's a second disc, and I thought I got shysted for a minute. I bought the wrong one, and I was like, what the hell? So I'm going through. I open up my disc. That's right. It's literally the second I open it up, she tells me, yeah, there's a second disc underneath the Blu-ray, and there it is, staring right back at me, and I'm just screaming every swear word I know, because I was an idiot and didn't even notice. So, damn you Warner Brothers for tricking me.
Yeah, no, I ended up putting 2 discs into one PS3.
See,
I was like, oh,
I'm
no.
very happy I didn't do that to mine.
I was like, why is it not playing? Mm-hmm. And then when I hit eject, it came out, and I was like, oh my god, and it was also not my PS3.
Mm-hmm. So you just looked around, you kind of gave the eyes, okay, nobody saw that.
No one saw that but one of my dogs. But my dog is, dogs are man's best friend, and they'll be real quiet.
Unless they learn to talk one day, and it's like, what? So, hey, you remember that time you pretended to throw the ball, and you didn't? If I tell your roommate you screwed up his PlayStation, yeah, don't think you'll be doing that anymore. All right, enough lollygagging. Let's get into the meat that is the Pacific Rim Blu-ray.
Yes, and I apologize if you guys are going to hear papers rustling. I took as much notes as I could because, unlike Chris, I do not trust my memory. So, and the best part is, now looking back, I can't read all of my handwriting.
Well, let's be honest here. I also don't, I don't trust my memory as much either. I'm just much lazier than you are. You obviously are much harder worker than I am. So that's why I'm entrusting you to a lot of this, and I'll be happily riffling along with you.
Okay,
riffing,
that's no problem.
Riffing, not riffling. That whatever word that is.
You made a new word.
Yes, I do that all the time. All right, so enough lollygagging. Let's get down to brass tacks.
Yes, so everyone starts off, I don't know about you guys or you, Chris, but whenever I'm online or I get a DVD, the first thing I look at is the deleted scenes. Because it's always interesting to see what gets cut out. And you always get, reactions like, yep, that definitely should have not been in there. It has no point in the story. And some is like, it's so good!
Yeah.
Why did they delete it? And sometimes it's just like a, editorial choice.
It's a matter of pacing half the time.
Yes, and I noticed that they have 4 sections. I never do play all. I always hit each deleted scene separately because play all just confuses me.
Yeah, because you don't know where one's stopping, where one's beginning. I've had that problem where it's like, oh wow, that was a good 2-3 scenes, and then I'd go back look in the chapters. It's like, oh, that was all one huge scene. They just they took out like a massive chunk of sequences. They edited it together and just threw it back into the disc.
Yeah, they did. And I think for the first one it's called The Wall of Life Rations, where we got to see what Riley Beckett and the other, his friend that we see all the time, as he's a character actor. He is in, he played the brother of a show like According to Jim, I believe it was.
He looks like the poor man's Patton Oswalt. That's what I was calling him.
Yeah, he played the brother for, I believe it's To the Wife of According to Jim, that show. And it was basically just them, daily life, and then you got a real good shot of what kind of food they ate. It was
MREs, pretty much, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I was kind of like, I can see why they cut this out.
Yeah, well, it was just a little touch of world building, pretty much. I think that they got the point across that, yeah, everything's rationed, so, and they did, retouch upon that when Raleigh shows up to Hong Kong for the first time sitting in the mess hall, and he's like, oh, bread, I haven't seen that, and, Herc gives that mention, he's like, oh, Hong Kong, open port, we still got all the goods, so, it was one of those moments where it's like, I could see Guillermo sitting there, it's like, well, we talked about this later, okay, let's cut this out, move on.
Right. And then the next one that actually I believe we saw in a trailer, it was titled Excuse Me.
Yes.
It's the one where right after, they accuse Newt, Charlie Day, to be a Kaiju groupie, which I still need to get that tank top that says that. And then, of course he says, I've always wanted to see one up close and blah, blah. And then Riley was like, you don't want that. And then he gives this mini speech about how, we need to understand the kaiju and all this stuff. And then, however, Riley was like, no, we need to blow them to pieces. And then there's they do their arguing. And then I guess he, Riley gets in the last word. And then Newt is saluting. And he goes, also, who are you saluting to?
Yeah.
And then, Charlie's just real awkwardly standing there.
But yeah,
cut out.
But yeah, if you watch the previews like we have a million times, it's one of those sequences where you don't really think about it at first, but when you go back and you watch the trailer after you see the movie, it's like, wait, that wasn't in there, and that does happen all the time. We actually, what was it? I think the best case in point when I was younger, when this came to mind, was Half Baked, the Dave Chappelle movie.
Yes.
I saw the preview a million times before I saw the movie, and there was a sequence where Jim Burr was talking about being a professional meter hopper, and then, he's hopping over a parking meter and then hits himself in the crotch. Not in the movie, and I always says, that's when I first learned, it's like, oh, yeah, they put, it's either from an earlier cut or it's just something that the trailer people are like, yeah, this works, this is a selling point, and, it doesn't always make the final cut. At least it was here, so we, get to see. It makes me wonder what else they really... it's those tiny moments that usually stand out the biggest.
Yes, and you allow to see one of the main reasons why Del Toro hired Charlie Day. Because at WonderCon, he goes, no, it's amazing. One of the reasons why I hired him is because in one episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, he was talking about rats or something like that. It was that episode. He goes, and he just goes into this great spiel, and I was like, I want this guy in my movie. And I thought that was a great deleted scene that can further show his acting abilities, as most people only know him from Always Sunny.
Always Sunny, or maybe Horrible Bosses.
Yes. And then the next one that I actually really liked, because I actually had that thought, I can't say over-analyzing, but when Newt makes his own little drift compatible machine.
They never show you where he gets all the crap from for it.
Yeah, and then the title of this deleted scene was called Theft. And you got to see him go in and just take things. Like, he goes into kind of like an underground kind of storage unit where it's like a wired cage. Some people have those in their apartment buildings. And he was just taking equipment, making equipment, and I love the part, it's his mannerisms when he takes something. and he sees something else and he drops that item, and he's like, "Oh no, this will do."
Yeah, and this was actually a scene I thought probably could have stayed in. It's only like, and mind you, most of these scenes are only roughly like what, a minute, like a minute and a half, which sometimes is a long time. But like this particular sequence, I think was only like 45 seconds. It was just him like going through. It was a nice Charlie Day moment where, you know, it's just him rummaging, making, you know, you just get to see his physical aspects. It did, you know, give you an idea. It's like, you know, because when you see in the movie, you just think he tore apart his own laboratory to build the drift machine, not realizing that none of that equipment's really there for him to access. So he had to actually go into, you know, where they store like maybe the extra parts for the Jaegers.
Yeah. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And I loved that scene. I felt that scene should have stayed in there because it's always moments like that. You do have people that come out of a movie and go like, I don't understand where she got that dress.
Yeah.
She just showed up and she was wearing the... Yeah.
Nope. I think we lost you.
Scene she had a blue dress. You always have those people that overanalyze.
I know, yeah. That's a plague upon movies today. It's... Pacific Rim was really one of those where people kind of sat there and like, well, this doesn't make sense. That it's like, okay, if you're not buying into the aspect of, you know, humanity has built giant walking tanks to fight enormous aliens, then you really shouldn't even be watching this movie. You're sitting there just nitpicking everything. I read a lot of that back with Iron Man 3, where everyone's like, well, this doesn't make sense. And, you know, it's just like, it's inconsequential to the rest of the film. It's just, you know, an editing, you know, cut where they probably said, look, if you're... Robert Rodriguez said it best with in his commentary for El Mariachi. There's a sequence where the mariachi walks up to town and he gets a coconut and he walks off and he's drinking the coconut and he's like, oh crap, I forgot, you know, he says it in the commentary. He's like, I forgot to shoot a scene with mariachi giving the coconut guy money. So his whole thing was, well, I either cover it in post or I just kind of go along with it and just if people are sitting there already nitpicking the fact that he just got a free coconut and that's taken out of the movie, then I've not done my job as a filmmaker, and thus why are they even bothering to watch this?
Oh my goodness, no, so that like all three, I mean, with the exception of the Wall of Life rations, I liked Excuse Me and Theft. However, the next one, which is the last one, which is Catch You in the Drift, Dad, I personally didn't like it. It's a scene where Herc's son,
Chuck.
you know, and yeah, just kind of having to this tiff, and I like to call it the whiners moment.
Yeah.
You know he has daddy issues.
Yeah.
There's no need for you to listen to him whine about how he wasn't really a dad, and so he was more of a dad in the drift than he had in real life with him growing up, and it was this whole thing. I was like, no.
It just made him a complete douchebag, other than just being an asshole, that, you know, a cocky asshole, which suited him much better. They play up in, like, when Stacker is getting on his ass, when he's asking, it's like, you know, we're not exactly drift compatible, and Stacker's just like, look, I bring nothing to the drift. You are, you know, you're just a hotshot with daddy issues. That easy to figure out day one. That's all it needs to be. So yeah, definitely this was a scene that, you know, I'm glad Guillermo left on the chopping block, because really, as you know, he'll say, as you know, we'll touch upon later on in the commentary. It's like this was a group thing. We need to, you know, everyone had to come together, and if you didn't like Chuck at that point, you know, there was no reason to really get behind him in the end when he makes that ultimate sacrifice.
Right. And I felt like people are not, depending on the audience, I was going to say people aren't stupid, but then I realized I may have spoken too soon. I mean, there are smart people and, you know, people that are not so smart, but we all get the drift that he's got dad issues. We know that he's kind of got anger issues and everything. We didn't need that extra 1 minute or whatever of him, like, whining or fighting with his dad. Like, we know that you have problems. But yeah, and then there was only 4 deleted scenes in which we were really surprised. I was surprised about. I don't know if you were surprised.
You know, and that, honestly, that last one was probably the one of most substance, if you will. Like, that was like the only thing that really, like, he sat there, it's like, oh, okay, that was that would have been a glaring omission had it been in the movie and taken out. All the other ones are just pretty much kind of like little filler scenes, little moments, just to trug the movie along.
Right. Right. And of course, after deleted scenes, everyone likes to do blooper reels, which I didn't know existed until I meant like in the past.
Yeah.
Until I watched Jackie Chan movies.
Uh-huh.
And it continues in the end with like thing. And then I guess it didn't break my idea or shatter the glass, as you will, in the How I Met Your Mother reference, but I always took movies as like a really serious making moment, but it's actually really, I'm used to it now. It's kind of relieving to see them just be people, just actors like doing that stuff. Before I was like, no, it's not in the tone of the movie. But now I'm like, I kind of enjoy them actually now.
Oh, exactly. There's, there could probably be a whole, just channel dedicated to B-roll of bloopers and stuff. Just there's that much out there, so.
It is. I was watching them because to me it's more of an enjoyment, so I didn't really have that many notes. But I noticed 4 things. Rinko, excuse me if I said her first name wrong, but Rinko pulls a Miley Cyrus every time. However, she does it with much more class and cuteness to it. And by a Miley Cyrus, we mean she sticks out her tongue. Did you notice that?
Yeah, she does that a lot. I think that's a Japanese thing because I've seen the plethora of Japanese movies I've owned. I've seen the few behind-the-scenes stuff like younger actors. That's a big thing where, they're them goofing around. It's like a tongue. They stick out their tongue like kind of like giving you the raspberry.
Yeah,
I might be overstepping the fact that it's a Japanese thing, but it seems to be a staple of Japanese goofing off, if you will.
Yes, and I like, but she does it much more cute. I think Miley did it for a different reason. She did it because I think it's just.
Oh yeah, because Miley was a whore when she did it, and plus she looked like a giraffe with Down syndrome, and that's really bad to people, giraffes with Down syndrome because she's just giving them a very bad name.
Right. Oh my goodness. So, yeah, I was still thinking, that's the first thing I noticed. And I actually had a friend walk by and go, why is her tongue out in every blooper scene? I was like, I don't know, but it's cute when she does it. But no, the next thing, I like cute, subtle, I would say, I guess I use cute because I'm a girl, but like the subtle mistakes, especially like when Ron Perlman and Charlie Day were looking out, and then they were talking about something, and all of a sudden you feel they look to the right, and you hear Guillermo yell, "Kaiju is on the left," like real, just letting them know, and then they're just like, "Oh, okay." Head turns to the left, and I always think it's directions like that are. It's just small mistakes that are actually funny. Not the mistakes itself, but like the humor of the situation.
I would pay good money just to see the behind-the-scenes stuff of every movie Guillermo and Braun have done. Because they are pretty much the modern-day John Carpenter and Kurt Russell, in my opinion. And you can just imagine the shit that they give each other, and it just what's on tape is probably worth its weight in gold.
Right. Just kind of like, and I really like, I think the last thing that they showed was Charlie Hunnam. You see it through the peephole point of view, but you see Riley walk up with purpose up to like Mako's door, and then he trips.
So is that all 4 points?
Actually, I would like to say I really love the part where either they're done filming that scene or that day, but it's all of the crew and the cast. They parted like the Red Sea, and Del Toro is just walking down, giving everyone high fives, like he's walking like a champ, walking with purpose. And I was kind of like, oh, he had his moment. That's so great. I like how they added that onto. I don't know why it's a blooper, but I do like it. It wasn't funny, but it was kind of like these people really enjoyed working with him, and he was really their role model.
He's like a big teddy bear. You can't hate him. You just want to hug him.
Yes.
I will say this. You notice that there was a severe lack of Idris Elba in any of those bloopers.
Yes, maybe because he got everything right the first time.
Yeah, he seems like that. He's British, so he takes his acting very seriously.
Yeah, he does. And he doesn't strike me as someone that makes a lot of mistakes, but maybe we're wrong.
I guess it's depending on the situation, but I doubt there's probably really much, especially anything that's really worth putting on a reel of that sort that's worth of anyone's time. So you might have flipped a line here and there, and probably just was like, okay, it's just go again.
Right, right. And there's actually, I believe there's a scene where you just see him, it's obviously green screen in the back, but he walks up through the crowd of people, and then and then he does his canceling the apocalypse speech. Doesn't really seem like there's any mistakes there, but it's just kind of a background to just, I believe it is part of the blooper reel, but it's not like a funny haha blooper, it's more like a behind the scene type of thing. So I really like that. And the next thing that I really enjoyed on the special features was they really took a deep look into the 4 drifts. And it was called the drift space because it flashes so quickly through the movie that you don't always get to see everything. And what the DVD did was they showed you all the drifts, in which if you actually look closely, you can see Del Toro in one of the scenes. However, and then after it goes through, and it'll stop through different points of the memories in the drift, and then notes will pop up and then tell you kind of things about the character. And the first one that they did was Riley Beckett. And you actually find out that he has a sister, and which I want to know what happened to her. But also, I've always wondered what his age was. And it says that he's 27. I thought he was like 30.
Well, if you do the math, the movie it was 7 years into the war, so it was 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So 20, it was what, 2020 when the movie starts? When Gypsy Fights Knifehead, so 5 years later, so you figure he's like 23, then it's about 27. That'd be about right. It would actually age him properly, because they kind of gave him just a tad look to kind of de-age him by about a couple of years in that opening. Right.
Yeah, they're pretty good with that. I noticed, like, with just a little bit longer hair, kind of flopped to the side, you look younger.
Oh, yeah.
And then you find out all kinds of things, and they kind of give a personality profile, like how his parents met. There's a part that I didn't understand, which was his ruling planet was Mars. Do you remember seeing that? Like, for every character, they said, like, what their ruling planet was. I don't know if that's, like, a zodiac thing that's happening.
I didn't notice, because, mind you, I watched the movie, like, 4 times in the theater, so every time those drift sequences come by, I'm trying to pick out everything. I never noticed the planet stuff, though, because I guess it's just, I'm, like, a couple of frames behind in my head when I'm looking at that stuff. So, yeah, I didn't get the planet thing either.
I don't get it. Yeah, because up with the personality profile, it'll say like age, how parents met. It'll say ruling planet Mars. I'm like, I'm sorry, is this a zodiac? Am I confused? But what I did like is they gave a background of how him and his brother grew up, and that like his brother always protected him and brought him into the world of comic books. And like on his 10th birthday, on Riley's 10th birthday, he somehow, if I read my notes correctly, not only gave him a superhero cape, but made him like a small armored suit so they could always be superheroes together when they grew up, and that he would always be there to protect him. In the beginning when they're like, we're not the most athletic, but we always got into scraps and fighting. And I felt like that part of the personality profile that they wrote was very touching, because you saw how close he was with his brother and why they ended up being pilots, which is a appropriate career choice.
Which, if you do read the graphic novel, they do go into a bit more.
Yes, we can always do another wonderful episode podcast with the graphic novel. And then from there they went with personality profile, in which some were pretty interesting, like he's most happy when, and it says alone and people watching, and it says current significant person in their life, Mako Mori. And then it says role models that they looked up to. And I thought that was really interesting. I actually started laughing. Some of them were Dennis Leary, Winston Churchill, Paul McCartney, and Bruce Lee.
Now, that all came out of that Bible that Del Toro and Travis Beacham wrote. I know that they had Beachman said I think they made like a 1,200-page just character bible to everything in the world, which is um, because Del Toro gets super detailed in a lot of stuff.
Yes.
It's kind of the same thing what I'm sorry, Edgar Wright did for Scott Pilgrim when he wrote up all those little like notes for each of the actors, for the backgrounds of their characters, something that they know about the character but the rest of the audience won't know. I think.
And as I was just by Riley alone, I was already kind of like, oh my god,
Yeah.
it's amazing how detailed they go into the background of these characters that some of us will never see in the movie if you don't get the special features, or you don't get to read the graphic novel, or you don't get to read the novelization. And I think it's amazing that they've created this world. Did not know it was that many pages, though.
Oh no, it's pretty thick, but knowing Del Toro, he's probably just like, oh no, you got to eat, we got to like put down their favorite breakfast cereal, that kind of stuff. It's a testament to his knack to detail. It's him, like guys like him and James Cameron are like that. Like when we go on later on, there was when I was listening to the commentary, there was a lot of stuff he was pointing out that I saw that movie projected on IMAX, and there was stuff I didn't notice until he was pointing out, and that's just the kind of detail that they put into it. So it reminded me to come back to that when we go into the movie later.
Oh, no problem. No problem. And, of course, after Riley, they do Mako. And with Mako, you actually find out that her father is a 20th generation blade maker, and that they're from Kyoto. So the whole sword thing will make sense to many people now.
Yeah.
Her parents, and I'm not surprised, had a prearranged marriage. And this is the sad part is, if for many of those who do not know the Japanese culture or Eastern cultures, they weigh very heavily on you having sons as opposed to daughters.
Yeah.
So apparently her mother had 2 miscarriages, both boys. And so Mako is an only child, and she was a girl. She's a girl. So obviously she grew up to be a tomboy. She's very close to her dad. I was very surprised that she is 22. And they actually gave her birthday, April 23rd, 2003.
Wow. So by today's stats, she'd be 10 years old.
Yeah, exactly. So now we know that she's 10 because you actually find out, which they go back, and they explain this whole thing, which is, I find even more depressing. And when I told my roommates, they're like, you should not have given us that story, which they gave this whole thing into why Mako was the only survivor of the kaiju attack in Tokyo, because her family went into town to sell the swords and all this stuff, and it was implied that those were like a new pair of red shoes, because I'm a child once, and I understand she had this weird obsession with her shoes, but like a little kid, when you get something new because they were shiny, you don't want to lose it. And so as they were running through when Onibaba was chasing them, her shoe fell, and she let go of her dad's hand, and she went back to go get the shoe, and by the time she turned around, all she saw was ash falling from the sky. I would like to think it's building ash. However, for those who watch Doctor Who, that ash could be carcasses.
Well, that was the thing, though. They didn't give you any indication that that Onibaba had any like special attacks. Like, it was just a giant crab. But if it had like a heat beam of some sort, then yeah, that would have made perfect sense.
Yeah, it is, because when the first time I saw the movie, the first thing I thought is, girl, where are your parents? Why are you by yourself just in a street?
Yeah.
Like, how are you the only survivor? Were you in a dumpster? What was happening? But it makes sense when you watch deleted scenes or special features. And then they went into personality profile, which is her secret hope, or is either her, as I try to read my notes, that her secret hope or her fear, I can't remember which one, is that her destiny is greater than her circumstance. Which, now that I'm reading it out loud, I think it's her secret hope and not her secret fear.
Yeah.
But she's most happy, I think, much like Riley, being quiet and like being alone and rebuilding or seeing machines as she grew up close to her dad. And, she learned a lot about swords and how they're made. Her father was a blade maker. And I thought that was really interesting. Then the two things that I really enjoyed was her current significant love is Riley Beckett and training.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, training is not a noun, but I was like, it's such in the Japanese culture, like work is your love.
Yeah, that's why they're ahead of us in many, many things.
It is, and her heroes are Katano and Stacker Pentecost (parentheses Sensei).
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't had a chance to look up Katano yet, but I should. I feel like it's a name I should know. However, yes, and those were her things I thought was really interesting. And then right after that, they went straight to Newt,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was really, really funny. They went into, he is so interesting. I always felt like Newt and his the name skips me, his professor mathematician frenemy.
Oh yeah, I'm blanking on it right now too because you put me on the spot. But yeah. His buddy, the 3PO to his R2.
Yes, I was gonna say the Dark Knight Rises feared bodyguard when he heard his boss going down.
Mm-hmm.
However, yeah, so they were going. Apparently, his Newt's father and mother. Father was a piano tuner. Mother was an opera singer. They had an affair, despite both of them being married,
Mm-hmm.
and she left him behind after he was born.
Aw.
So he's born in. Apparently, he's 1980.
Mm-hmm.
January 19th, 1980, and it was really funny. It says, physical appearance, 45 years old, emotional, 12. And then it said, ruling planet, Uranus, sorry but true.
Well, you know who that kind of describes, too, a little bit? That describes Del Toro, because that's about the age he is as well.
Yeah, it is. They're about 40. He's about 48.
Mm-hmm.
And which, also, Mako was wonderful. She gets two ruling planets, Saturn and Venus.
I'll never get the ruling planet thing. That's something if we ever get Travis Beachman on, we got to ask him about.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. I was like, and it is appropriate that Newt is Uranus.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, just the word and the planet in itself. And I guess his negatives in life is that he couldn't sing for the life of him, but he thinks that he can.
Mm-hmm.
His secret dream is to be a rock star. He is most happy singing, dancing, playing the keyboard, and proving Gutenberg, or his name, Goat. I'm just going to call him Goaty.
Mm-hmm.
Proving Goaty wrong. So I thought that was really funny because that's what makes him most happy. And it says his present love interest is whoever will take him. And the people that he looks up to is Bear Grylls, Fox Mulder, and rock stars.
Makes sense.
And so I thought that was really funny. And of course, from there, they talked a little bit more about who he is and how him and his C-3PO met. And they were saying how he started talking to Hermes.
Mm-hmm.
I guess Hermes Gottleb.
Mm-hmm.
I can't pronounce the name. Excuse me. Gottleib.
Mm-hmm.
He started talking to Hermes Gottleb. I'm going to say Hermes.
Mm-hmm.
He's the son of the original Jaeger programmer inventor. And so Goatee stimulated Newt's mind, and apparently they wrote passionate letters back and forth, like, describing all kinds of intelligent things and academical papers. When they finally agreed to meet in 2017, they instantly disliked each other. And so I was actually kind of hoping that under his present love interest that Goatee was there. It was Hermes. I hope that it would have said Hermes.
Well, that's an interesting tidbit too, because that's the same year that the shit started hitting the fan too, in the timeline. Because that's the year that we open up in the film, and that's when Yancey dies and Gypsy gets messed up by Knifehead.
Yes, and I thought that was really interesting. I was like, I loved it because it was like so straightforward. It was like wrote passionate letters, really stimulated each other's minds. Decided to meet in 2017. It was like instantly disliked each other. And I thought it's so funny how you can get along with someone so well online or over the phone, but the moment you meet, it's their, personalities or quirks or mannerisms
It just
that
rubs them the
tick
wrong
you
way.
off.
Yep. But there's something to those characters, though. They have I don't know if it's like I can't put my finger whether or not they actually do like each other, or if it's just an odd mutual respect they have for each other.
It it is weird. They're lovely frenemies. And of course, as the movie started, I knew Goatee was going to help him at the end. So I mean, they fight because they each believe that they're right.
Well, it's also because Hermes has the better understanding of the atomic structure of the oh god, again I'm blanking on it because they put me on the spot. The portal.
Right.
Yeah, like he's not the kaiju expert. He's more the tech guy for everything else that involves the other universe.
Right. And I always felt like, I know in a lot of sci-fi it always seems it's so technology heavy, it's so everything, but I think there is a point to understanding biology or zoology. Because if you are dealing with aliens, or if you're dealing whatever movie you're in, you're going to need to kind of know.
Exactly.
So I thought that was really important. And I apologize if everyone can hear me typing. Katano was a character that I looked up and it's just blinking on me, so now I'm like, I have to know. It's that one thing that's gonna bug me.
It's eating
Like,
away at you.
it is eating away. Like, where did Newt get all that equipment to make a fake drift? And of course, as my page loads. But yeah, I didn't know if you had anything that you really liked about the drift.
No, the drift stuff. It was more interesting than the fact of how they actually shot it in retrospect. When I was looking at everything,
Yes, and they go into that, right?
Yeah.
In the regular DVD.
Yeah, they do. Because when I saw that first, and I was looking at that stuff, I'm just like, I was more impressed with just the way that Guillermo set up those shots, because everything they made everyone dress in black and white, and then he added the blue light filters over everything. So everything is pretty much done, in camera with just a little bit of post with the editing and the speed up and all that. But it was nice because here's the idiot I am. I never realized that this young Mako in the scene where you see her in her past. They reuse that same girl for all the drift sequences, but it's going by so quick that it's just like, oh yeah, she got more than one scene. That's nice.
Yes, it is. It is. And apparently, I just looked up Katano, and obviously, Google's wonderful. They pulled up the Katano Hotel in New York, something about a jazz club. The only one I find, and you guys feel free to comment if you guys know who, Del Toro and Travis is actually referring to. But the closest one we found was Takashi Kitano, who is a Japanese film director, comedian, singer, actor, film editor.
Best known as the asshole teacher in Battle Royale.
Yeah, and that was kind of like, that would be a very odd choice.
But he plays like a heavy in a lot of Kenji Fukusaki films too. Right.
So I was kind of like, okay, now I've learned something. So I was like, oh, okay. And the next part that took me a while and to go through, because I really loved it, was the Shatter Dome. Which, by the way, so jealous that they thought of that word first.
The Shatter Dome.
Because it is a kick-ass name. Kind of like in Doctor Who, when River Song, you find out the name of her prison, and it's called Storm Cage.
Yeah.
My friend who's a writer goes, F balls! Moffat, you beat me again. That's an amazing name.
It is. It's simplest. And, it also sounds very... It has that actiony, almost slight anime tone to it, but it's just English enough that you're just like, God damn it, that just sounds... It's a metal word in the past tense purpose of it. It's just, it's fucking hardcore.
Yes, and I really liked it. I was like, oh my god. Because usually shatter is not really a positive term.
But it's like, we're storing giant goddamn robots in this place, so yes, of course we're calling it the Shatter Dome.
Yeah, but then dome, just adding the word dome
it's
makes
because
it so
it's a place that, Epic cannot... you can barely contain the Epic inside of this place.
Yeah. And I thought that was really interesting. However, they broke when you clicked on the Shatter Dome, they kind of broke it into several parts. And the first part is the animatics, or I like to call the animation part. It's kind of like I would describe it best to people as motion comics with some sound, but like no dialogue.
It's a moving storyboard, pretty much.
It's a moving storyboard, exactly. And I have a lot of friends who are storyboard artists, and they put so much work into it because before they make a shot, they kind of have to draw it out. And they had, I believe, 5 of them. And some of them, I put little notes. Some of them I didn't really have much to say. Maybe, Chris, you may have something. But the first one that they had was the Anchorage Coast, which was pretty much shot for shot what happened.
Yeah.
It's Grandpa and little grandboy just kind of walking along, and then you see Gypsy Danger and things happen. So I was like, oh, okay. It was like standard. And then the next one was Tokyo Street, where you got to see more scenes of the people every day kind of through Tokyo. And it's pretty interesting. I think it's also kind of standard. And the next one is obviously the Hong Kong Bay, which I think is also pretty standard. However, the last 2 that I really liked was the anti-kaiju refuge, because what you see is different than what actually showed up in the film, because from what I could tell from the sketches, it's both Ron Perlman's character and Newt that are hiding in the kaiju refuge.
Interesting. See, I love when that kind of stuff happens, where it's like they change, it might have been like a last minute script change, and pretty much it was simple where it's like, okay, we just take Perlman out, we just change some dialogue. But that kind of stuff I always love when that kind of stuff creeps in.
Yeah, it does. And to go back to the Tokyo Street, it's the scene where it's a pretty long motion comic, but it's the scene where you get to see Mako stuck in her drift, and you see her as a little girl. So it's a lot of the scene of her being chased by Oni Baba and all this other stuff, and it's a long chase sequence. I can see why they cut a lot out of it. However, the most interesting part is you see Mako go through Riley.
Oh yeah,
so,
yeah, that's
so
right. They're talking about that, like it's talked about one of the features where when you're inside the drift, you can't really interact with each other. Like, you can talk to each other, but you can't like touch each other to a point. Like if you're sitting inside, like Raleigh was just sitting inside Mako's memory, so she couldn't hear him, but he really couldn't interact with anything there. But because of the budgetary reasons, because it would have had to set up for more effect shots, they just said, okay, well, Raleigh's there, he never touches anything, so you never really see him have an effect on the environment in her mind.
Right. And another thing, of course, the big one you and I have talked about is the last one of the animation, the kind of moving storyboard, was the Pacific Ocean, which is when, of course, Mako's escape pod comes up first, and then you see Riley's come up, and then she freaks out. She swims over. They drew them. Yeah, they were kissing. They kissed. So you can see in the original that they kiss, and Riley pulls back, and he's got like, I can only describe as mini Thor hair, which it's long and blonde and flowy, and in the motion comic it's flowing. The wind's blowing, it's flowing. And I was kind of like, that's interesting. Maybe because I'm a girl, I noticed the hair. But Mako, they almost drew her exactly the way she looks, with the bangs and the hair down to the shoulders. But I don't know if that was just they were in a hurry. They drew him with longer hair, or originally, I don't know what it was.
They might have had him with. They might have had him with longer hair at one point. Like, they wanted to keep the, maybe the lost soul aspect, if you will, because that's a staple. It's like when especially when a hero falls, like, he kind of goes into a stupor, he grows out the beard, grows out the hair. Like, it's the I don't give a shit look. It's turning into almost like a drifter. And they might have, that might have been something that at one point they're like, we'll kind of let him keep a little bit of like long hair, but it looks like something they just scrapped altogether, maybe.
Yeah, it was in the motion comic, when you saw his hair flow, I was kind of like, this is like a Thor hair product commercial. Like Achilles from Troy.
Yes.
When they showed that trailer
nice
with
hair.
lovely Brad Pitt. And the next part of the Shatter Dome section of the special features, I got super excited, which was the concept. The entire next section was just called concepts. So you got to see concepts of things. And the first section, the concepts, were the kaijus. and they had such amazing detailed work. Alex and Guy Davis did some amazing work, and the first one was The Trespasser. And, I was like, oh, okay, I made notes of the ones that I really loved. And after Trespasser, they had Knifehead, and I was like, Street Sharks. Does anyone remember?
Yes. You're talking to a child of the 90s who still holds onto his affinity for cartoons of days of yore. So I know Street Sharks very well. If you, the listener, don't know Street Sharks, pause this podcast, go to YouTube, just look up Street Sharks intro. Pretty much in the 90s, the mid 90s was a magical time for cartoons because there was a weird window where they were moving out of toy product placements and into having a little more quality story, but there was also a point when everything had to have a message and be kind of ethnically diverse too. But in that, there was a year or two window between that. So we're talking out of the ripple of a water drop, we're talking about the very center, this nuggety center, where everything for a good 2 years was extreme. You had G.I. Joe extreme, you had Street Sharks, which were these muscle-bound, giant, ripped shark men that would, cut through the street, and they were extreme because they rode skateboards and drove bikes and everything, and that was the 90s equivalent of extreme.
And there was also Samurai Pizza Cats?
Oh, I love Samurai Pizza Cats. I'm going to have you on one of my podcasts one day where we could just reminisce about 90s cartoons. Oh, it was so good. I love the 90s. Extreme Ghostbusters was probably the best out of that whole bunch because it really there was nothing really extreme about them, but you just had to put extreme to get a child's attention at that point. And mind you, this is the era of Surge Cola. So before energy drinks, but when Mountain Dew reigned supreme, someone dared say, no, we could do more sugar and more caffeine than Mountain Dew.
Exactly, and it reminds me, when you said Surge Cola and Extreme, because it just describes the 90s, even down to our clothing of choice, although the 80s, I think, was more out there. However, comic books, they're holographic covers, foil covers, pop-ups, I don't know what was happening with the comics.
Everything was drawn by Rob Liefeld. That's how the look of everything was. Like, just muscle-bound dudes, just completely ripped. In order to keep bodies like that, they would have to be working out like 8 hours a day and not be going on missions to be doing whatever extreme thing they would be doing. And then women with tiny, tiny waists, big hips but no ass, and like huge boobs and like hair, like super Kelly Bundy, mid-run Married with Children hair, where it's just very pompadourish and just flowed.
Exactly. And with Surge Cola, for those who also have not seen, after you guys are done with this podcast, watch the episode of 30 Rock, where Jenna Maroney and Surge Cola. It was a really good episode.
Hey, I fell out of my seat watching that. I couldn't believe, because I was one of those kids that was addicted to Surge Cola. I thought it was the greatest thing ever. And then little did I know, 5 years later, Red Bull will come around, and it was just like, yeah, it gives me the unnecessary energy that I need, but it doesn't have the flavor.
You know what? The real sad thing is I'm going to have to go look for one. As a kid growing up, my mom wanted me to be healthy and have good teeth, whatever. Maybe it's part of the Asian American upbringing where moms can be sometimes strict, but in a good way. I was not allowed to have soda or anything with carbonation. So I wasn't able to have Surge Cola.
Yeah,
but
you were one of those kids. I love my mother. She did a pretty decent job. But the one thing I do love about my parents and their upbringing, me and my brother, was their nonchalant attitude towards a lot of stuff. It was, can we have some soda? Yeah, just don't drink all of it. You can have a can.
Moderation.
Yeah, it was moderation, but it was like, well, can we have Surge? Sure. My mom drank Diet Pepsi, so she tried to force that crap down our throats. To this day, I don't like any diet soda because of that. But she was not against, because my dad didn't like them either. So my dad was all about having Pepsi or Coke in the house, so we drank a lot of those. And then every once in a while, she would buy us Mountain Dew, but no one else would drink it but my brother and myself. And then when Surge hit the market, I was just having her buy 2 liters all the time. So it was a beautiful 2.5 years when that soda was on the shelf.
It was. It must be to you what Coke Black was to me, because I loved Coke Black.
See, my buddy would counter you back with crystal clear Pepsi, which I said was the devil's drink, because Pepsi was not meant to be clear; it's just unholy.
It's very true. And now for my mom who will be listening, now I'm addicted to root beer of all kinds. So look what happens.
But root beer's...
Moderation is key
Yes.
to raising children.
But root beer's not that bad, especially when you get those fancy root beers from like the soda shops.
Oh yeah.
Sioux City
yeah.
Sarsaparilla is the best.
But that's true.
And to end that note, I miss Fruitopia so much. That was my drink.
Oh my God.
That was my drink every day through high school. We had a Fruitopia machine. I would get the strawberry kiwi one, and
Yes.
that was my heroin every day. That was my between third to fourth period snack, and I that machine probably got most of my paycheck when I started working, because I was just getting like 2 bottles a day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and I was content. I was just, every time it hit me, if you've seen that, if you've seen Requiem for a Dream, when they're shooting up and you just see the eyes get big and you see the stuff going through, that's what it was for me. And I was just like,
Oh my goodness. I think for me, and I now after you and I are done podcasting and we're going through our post-happiness of the Pacific Rim DVD, I need to look up eBay to see if there's Orbit's drink.
Oh no, there's all of that's on there.
Yeah, because it's clear and it's got little floating jellies in it,
Oh,
which
yeah.
I think are amazing.
I'll tell you this, my buddy's brother, going back to Surge, he bought a 12-pack of unopened Surge Cola for $86 on eBay.
Holy shit, $86?
Yes, it was a whole 12-pack. It was unopened. And then he bought 2 liters that were unopened for $45. I'm like, you are fucking nuts. He said, I don't have anything else to spend on, and I miss Surge Cola. So they came in. I gave them $5 to try one. I don't know what magic they make aluminum cans out of, but I'll be damned if it didn't taste like it was bottled yesterday. The bottle stuff, on the other hand, had lost a lot of its carbonation, so it was very flat. But the can stuff still, for the most part, held its consistency.
Yes, God bless aluminum, but also please recycle for those who are listening.
Yeah.
So,
all right, and then let's get back into things. So we digress.
yes. So you guys get to know more about us as we're ranting about the 90s. But the next one that I really liked was Leatherback, because in the art that they showed you, it showed the detail of damage. They drew out the damage, exactly how he would look after he's been blasted, and it's just drawn so well. I wish I could just describe it through a podcast, but it's based, I mean, of course, pick up the book, The Art of Pacific Rim, and you will see that they had such a detail. Like, they knew every bone, every gooey thing that comes out of them. They drew it out before they actually made it into the film. And Leatherback, I thought, in that, not my favorite kaiju, but in terms of the way they drew the concept and how he was going to be damaged, I really did like. Just like Otachi, which is this next one. The next ones they call was Otachi and Baby Otachi, which I thought was really cute. But they really gave into detail the tongue and the 3, I wouldn't say forms, but 3 levels the way the tongue, it comes out, then another one comes out.
It's like the alien tongue.
Yeah, alien, and then another one comes out.
It's the alien tongue with the Reaver mouth, or the Reaver tongue, if you will. It's citing back to other Del Toro work.
Yes, and I really, I liked the detail of the tongue, because when I'm watching the movie, I'm just freaking out that Newt is about to be touched by something like that. But, like, my brain is not processing the intricate details and the illumination of the tongue. But if you pause your DVD, you can see the concept art and the drawings that it went into it. And the next one I liked, because he reminded me of Killer Croc that has been transformed by a virus in Batman, in the Batman universe, was Raiju. They showed a real fast picture, and I'm like, it's Killer Croc.
Yeah, because when the outer head shell is closed, it actually looks like a big crocodile.
It does.
Which, when I saw that concept art before the movie came out, I'm like, oh, so that, to me, was like the closest, Toho-looking kaiju design at that point. And then when they revealed, okay, he's got the big flowery head, then it turned into an Ultraman character for me.
Yes. No, and then the next one was a Scunner.
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't have too many notes on that. I was like, okay, he's a kaiju. Mm-hmm. And then Slattern I really like because he had 3 tails.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry if I say he for everyone. Obviously, we now know some is a she or some sort of clone. But I'm going to just say
I'm
he.
I'm going off that they're sexless because they're clones anyway.
I should say it, actually, for everyone. But Slattern had 3 tails, and I thought that was kick-ass.
Oh, yeah, that's how it did the I would call it the the whirlpool attack, if you will, when it smacked Striker Eureka.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I wish we saw kind of more of that. And then the next one I liked because I actually started laughing. And then the next category was Daikaiju. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard for me to say it without the Asian accent because Da means D-A-I. It's in Mandarin, and as you know, a lot of kanji, a lot of words from Japan come from. They look like Chinese words. Mm-hmm. Dai or da means big or very large. So you add that as a prefix in front of the word kaiju, and it just
big
means
monster.
Really, really super large. And it showed if as you hit the forward button, it's a slideshow of various large ones that they drew up but didn't really make it into the movie. And the one I really liked was the worm caterpillar looking one.
Yes, it has like a oh god, I saw the concept art for it when scans for the book came out.
It looks like one of those beautiful, intricate, and delicate caterpillars that you see during springtime and summertime. But you don't want to touch because they're freaking venomous. They're freaking venomous. Don't touch it, people. Kids listening, don't touch it. But if you want to capture it in a jar, feed it well, make it grow into a beautiful butterfly.
It has like the tail end has like a I forgot. Did they have a stinger, like an acid attack or something like that they?
I do not remember, but I saw it and I felt like that's such a different one from all the just physical form.
Well, it's like Onibaba stands out the most out of all of them because it was it was a big crab. So, that was the one thing I was kind of hoping that that they would elaborate a little more because as much as I enjoy that they kept with the more reptilian ones, if you will, one of the great things about Japanese kaiju is that they're of all shapes and sizes. They're insect and all that other great stuff. So touching upon other stuff like that, the caterpillar one would have been a real interesting one to see.
Yeah, no, and that one, and also the last thing that they have under concept art is maquettes, and that was really sad because there was no little special slideshow for Onibaba because he was my favorite. I was like, no. I actually wanted a friend was like, what do you want for Christmas? I was like, I want an Onibaba like plushie. And they were like, we can't, that's not real. So we're going to have to Etsy it and see if we can find it. But Onibaba was my favorite. There is no, on the special features, you guys, there is no detailed look into it. But after Daikaiju is Marquettes, in which so detailed and because they get to do a lot of close-ups, especially since our DVD that we bought, it's the Blu-ray version. You truly appreciate all the detail and all the work people go into making movies, and especially creature movies. Because now they're doing not stop motion, obviously, or puppetry for some, but they're doing maquettes. They have to draw, they have to do it, then they have to CGI, then they have to shoot it. And I always felt like all that detail, and I've always kind of been like, can I just take or steal one of them?
Yeah.
Marquettes?
Well, I know that Del Toro bought a couple of them for his collection, for his Uber house.
Right.
That's like one of his things. Like he usually buys a couple of the props from like the design department for all of his projects.
Right. And I would do the same thing. I wouldn't think he would have to buy it. I was kind of hope they would just give it.
Well, you gotta realize though, it's on the company dime. So they do lay claim to all that. I think the effects houses usually keep a couple, and then because I know that Stan Winston Studio kept everything that they did, so.
Right.
So.
But it's so beautiful, and it's always when I watch that and I look at that, all I can think is people need to remember that the actors are really important, but the true talent are the people who put like hundreds of hours into making little bumps and scales on these maquettes that will never see the light of day
Well,
in public.
you see, that's the beauty because a little company called Sideshow Collectible
Yes.
did license Pacific Rim, and they do have a series of statues coming out that are based on the maquettes. They're not the exact maquette that they made for the film, but they are based on the I believe the file scans that they gave them. So pretty much they make up the maquettes, they scan to computer, so they have all the dimensions, and then they can go and tweak them. Because I know that there's a gypsy fighting Slatern statue that I want so bad that's like $600, and it's like 3.5 foot high when put together. But it's a beautiful piece, but it's all done based off the models that ILM gave Sideshow. So
Oh my
if you have
goodness.
money, you can own one. But more than likely, a lot of people don't have the money for those, and so they will just go on as something that people look behind the window, put their hand up, and that single tear comes down, knowing that they can never have it.
I know what you mean. I have friends who go when we go to San Diego Comic-Con. I hope for many of you listeners, you guys can one day make it out. And they're just, sneak through the food hatch in the back or something. But I see it and it's like, oh my God, Iron Man, Mark 7, it goes $1,500.
Yes.
That's like rent.
And for some people, that is their entire collection. That's all that they collected are those statues. It's like it's not even like a figure. Like I get a figure and I get the occasional statue, but to just have a massive collection of statues, that is really hardcore. That's in the Godzilla fandom in the late 90s and early 2000s. The model kits, that's the equivalent of what those are today. Was the garage kits like from Kyoto and X Plus, and those were expensive as hell back then. But those you actually had to put together, so it was like, okay, I could see you're making a hobby out of it. You're not just buying a pre-painted statue just to put as a mantelpiece, but you want to put 9 more with it.
Yes, my only fear is that since, for those who don't know, me and Chris Eaton were based in Southern California. Earthquakes!
Yes, that's another thing I fear. I've actually, I have a couple of smaller statues. I have a King Kong one that I bought. It was a Weta one that Sideshow made. It's real tiny. I got it when, what was it? Tower Records. For those who don't know, Tower Records was a specialty store that sold records and all kinds of other collectibles. They got a massive shipment of the 2005 King Kong stuff in from Sideshow. I guess they bought out like the rest of the stock that Sideshow had, and they sold these things for cheap. So the Kong versus T-Rex, it's a badass piece because it's Kong on top of the T-Rex. The T-Rex is on his back. Kong's on top of him, hand in the air, getting ready to just pound the crap out of him. It's only about 6 inches high, but there's a point, the T-Rex tail comes all the way out and it sticks out. So I'm always paranoid that if anything falls over on it or if it falls off, that tail's going to break and I'm just going to be weeping manly tears of sorrow over it. So I've I've actually sat like a lunatic, sat in my room and looked, okay, where can I put this that if there's an earthquake, nothing's going to fall over? And so I have a flat, low-lying dresser that it sits in the corner. There's nothing above it. The dresser's wide enough that it will not fall over an earthquake unless it's like a 9.8. And it's perfectly aligned that nothing can possibly fall over on it. And I make sure that no one's ever in my room so that someone can throw something and hit it. So that is the weird kind of just detail that I go into that makes me a bit nuts that I am.
No, it's okay. I'm the same way as you, and I actually started to invest in museum putty. Because if those who have cats or you just have children or birds or whatever, obviously, if your roof falls during an earthquake, all is screwed.
Yeah.
But, you can do things to prevent. I put museum putty underneath it to kind of solidify it onto whatever surface I'm on.
Yeah.
So at least it won't be, knocked out or something like that.
One day I'm going to invest properly into proper display cases. So, but I'm one of those guys that has to have, the lighting and everything on it because I want people to see what I bought.
Right. No. I would love to do that, glass displays. But yeah, so that's what we have on Marquettes. Now you guys can all indulge in listening to me and Chris's future plans of display cases. And the next one we have are obviously after Kaiju are the Jaegers.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they show beautiful concept art of Gypsy Danger, Striker Eureka, you know, the two that we kind of see the most.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other ones are really interesting. Crimson Typhoon, for those who do not notice, has a headlight.
Mm-hmm.
The head is just a light, and I may be wrong because I haven't been able to go through all the concept art in the book, but are the triplets in the chest?
No, they're in the head.
Are they in the head?
Because you know when
It's a huge light, though.
yeah, I know when
And I can't tell. Once they show the con pod, I don't know where they are.
yeah, no, they're all pretty much in the head. It's what is it? Travis Beachman was explaining that initially because all the early up until the Mark III's, the nuclear reactors were placed in the chest because that was the only place they could properly hold them, and you know send the energy throughout the body and everything that they need. So all the con pods were put in the heads. Now, if you're a mech nut, a lot of people would argue that the head is the weakest spot. Why would you do that? And that's the reason. That's part of the reason why Gypsy's head isn't attached to the body half the time. They do that so that way they can prevent radiation exposure to the con pod from the rest of the Jaegers. Now, the Mark IV is on. I don't know because they did mention that they switched the power sources for him at one point. I know that to the point where they are in the movie that Gypsy was the last nuclear powered Jaeger. Very, very giant robo-ish, if you know that anime. But, you know, whatever power source they figured out, which is something they never... that's the one thing that always kind of bothered me. It's like, so what magical power source did you, you know, find in, you know, the 5 years between when Gypsy was operational to the later, you know, Jaeger models that... Why aren't you running everything off of that? I mean, obviously it has to be something super powerful and cheap enough to keep, you know... the mechs going. Also, I lost my train of thought here, but let me get back to it. Yes. So anyway, yes, con pods in the head. We were talking about Crimson Typhoon. It's a giant.
Well, the thing is, yeah, with the headlights so big, I wouldn't think like it was the only Jaeger that made me doubt where the pilots were.
Well, if you watch when Otachi takes him out. When he or when she clamps her tail onto the head, you actually see the claws come through and crush the con pod and yank him out. So I believe in Cherno, because Cherno isn't that big stack, isn't its true head. That's where its reactor is. They kind of built that one a little weirder. So the head is actually lower on the body where the lights are, and that's where the pilots are. So that's why when you see Leatherback, or you know, crush the chest region and destroy it, that's when it kills them. That's when it kills the pilot. So I believe the Cherno was like the only one that the compound was much lower in the towards the body than anything else.
Right. Okay, because there's just so much going on, and now that you said it, yes. I mean, even though I've watched this movie 8 times, embarrassingly, it's just because the whole head is a headlight. It's not just on its little forehead. The whole head is a headlight, which makes me wonder where the hell are the triplets. But you have reminded me, yes, like when he does get, when Otachi does crush them, you do see one of them go like kind of near one of the triplets.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same effect like when Knife Head ripped into Gypsy's head, and you see the claw come through and rip Yancey out. But the thing with that is though, Crimson has what I call the Cambot head, which if any of you know Mystery Science Theater, in the very beginning when they show you Cambot, it's just pretty much a giant camera. It's an odd design. I never understood it. That's part of the reason why I'm not really high on the look of Crimson, is the head just bugs the shit out of me. But when you really think about it, there's no way that any of the pilots could actually see outside through any sort of like window effect. I know Gypsy kind of had something like a visor effect, but everything's done through cameras on the Jaegers, which Yeah, be it sensors or something like that. It seems kind of like not a well thought through plan, because what if one of the kaiju just busts one of the sensors, then you're flying blind? But I guess they had that, taken care of somewhere. But yeah, everything's seen through a screen. You look on all of the whenever we see inside of the Conpod, everything's done up on a monitor, kind of like the bridge of the Enterprise.
Exactly. And when I saw the head of Crimson Typhoon, which, if you guys actually look, originally they named it Echo Beijing, all I could think is, like, is this the little light lamp, like Pixar's older, more badass brother from China? Like, why is his head a light? It reminds me of that beginning of Pixar when the little light comes and squashes down the eye. I was like, oh, why is your whole... I mean, it makes sense because then you can see everything. Yeah. It's bright. But I was kind of like, where are those triplets when I first saw
They're behind the giant light, pretty much.
Right. And then the next part, which I really love, is they give you concept art of all the fallen Jaegers that has happened between the time you assume, before Riley, but also when Riley is a construction worker of the wall. And, it kind of goes through a little bit fast. Somehow my DVD decided to kind of do a automatic slideshow instead of me letting manually do it. But, you saw the Japanese ones where they had swords.
Oh, yeah,
for
that's Tactic Ronin. I love that design, too.
Yes, Tactic Ronin. And then there was one with 3 legs.
That was, I think, Horizon Brave. I might be wrong. I believe me, I went through a lot of the stuff in the kind of wiki, and so I got there's Horizon Brave, which I think was the 3-legged one. I think that was like the 3rd Jaeger ever made, because the first one was Yukon Brawler, and that's the one that fights Karloff. That was the first ever Jaeger, and that's the one that's featured in the graphic novel too.
Yes, it is. And for those who don't know, go to the Pacific Rim Wiki. I haven't even had time to go through everything. However, I will, but I really went through all the kaiju categories. Yeah. So I'm going to have to do all the Jaeger stuff tonight while I have one working arm. Well, I fell. For those who are listening, it's like, what is happening? We got a one-armed host? No, I fell, so I only have one arm right now. And so I'm using my less dominant arm, which is my left hand, and now I'm finding things to do online. So I think I'm just going to scroll and, like, finish the rest of Pacific Rim Wiki.
Yeah, so that and Romeo Blue, which is when you look at the opening sequences, when they're giving you the brief history, that's the Jaeger you see in the night vision fighting the Kaiju. And that's the one you see in the propaganda footage. It's like, oh, we win second battle. That's the first American, the proper American Jaeger, I believe. That's one of the 2 pilots, the twins you see talking on the talk show. They're the pilots.
Oh, yes. Yes, and it was really good because, like, you're talking about propaganda, which apparently they will show us later. We'll talk about the propaganda posters, but they also show, if you look at their chests, because they're trying to model a lot of the feel, like with the pilots and everything, the feel of the World War II, which we call our world and nation's greatest war, but there's a lot of nose art, but it's actually near their chest. And I didn't notice it until I saw it, like, second, third viewing, because there's so much stuff going on. They have, like, they show you how many kaiju kills you have. Oh, yeah. So they look kind of, I wouldn't say, like, tally marks, but they're, like, little heads or symbols of what kaiju is, and you'll just kind of stamp them on to see how many you've killed. And a lot of it I loved is, like, the nose art. There's one of the bulldog, and it says Sarge with, like, an exclamation point. And, of course, the American ones it's like a sexy military woman with, like, grenades or bullets she's holding.
It's a play off the Betty Page pinup.
Yes. Yes, and then there was one that looks just like Astro Boy. So I was like, that's Astro Boy on somebody's Jaeger.
You can actually... Nika made dog tags with those symbols on them.
They did.
And they're just a pain in the ass to find right now. I've been looking for the gypsy ones for a long time, and nobody has them around here right now, sadly enough.
And I'm going to ask you, are you which is your favorite Jaeger? Are you a Gypsy or a Eureka?
I was Eureka. I love the look of Striker. Like, Gypsy when I initially, because, mind you, when I started following the project, because when they announced, it was a 2-prong kind of attack. a site erroneously reported that Guillermo del Toro was going to be doing the Godzilla movie. I will not mention said site's name right now. If you listen to my other podcast, I rip on them immensely. But they had mentioned that Legendary was using the script called Pacific Rim. It was about giant monsters. They were going to retweak it for Godzilla and have Guillermo direct it. They were way off on certain aspects, but they were very on to the fact that Guillermo was going to do that project. So when Legendary released the press announcement that Guillermo del Toro's next big film, and mind you, this is coming off of him having 2 movies fall apart on him. He was supposed to do The Hobbit.
Yeah.
And then
like From the Mouth of Madness, or for the
At the Mountains of Madness, yeah, which was going to be Tom Cruise, and James Cameron was going to produce that damn thing. So when James Cameron can't get a goddamn movie off the ground, you know there's some problems. So then, yeah, he hopped into Pacific Rim, and they announced just the broad concept. It was giant monsters coming out of the ocean. The world's band together with super weapons to take them on. And the idea that it didn't even cross my mind at the point was it was going to be giant robots. I was expecting, like, they make up super tanks and stuff like that. But, I thought it was just going to be like a kind of a more fanciful kind of Cloverfield, but with a Guillermo del Toro touch. So when the project finally started moving along, and Del Toro talks about, it's like, no, we're doing big robots, and they're going to be like lifelike robots. And I'm thinking in terms of like Mech Warrior, if you know that game. That's I like to call those more like real world robots, where they look much more functional to what we could actually make today instead of the very stylized Japanese robots. And then when that first poster came out for Comic-Con 2012, which I have, then I realized, oh no, they're going full bore with the stylized Japanese style robots with the humanoid look. So Gypsy was like, okay, cool, I get what they're going with it. It was a kind of a weird look at first, but when they showed Stryker, I'm like, yes, because the Stryker design was the closest to what I was expecting personally, so that's why I kind of gravitated towards it. It has that kind of Robotech Gundam kind of crossbreed look to it. More Robotech than anything else. Ironically, I'm not the biggest Robotech fan in the world. I have not watched all of it. Shocking. But the look is classic, though. I'm like, it's undeniably that's the most Japanese robot out of the whole bunch.
Right. I get what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
I get what you mean. But yeah, no, granted, all the pilots from different nationalities ended up switching Jaegers, whatever, but you're supposed to like Gypsy Danger.
Yeah.
But Stryker Eureka is just more sleek and just badass.
And I kind of
badass fast.
Yeah, and not only that, but I think just the fact that you have, because I kind of gravitated towards Hercules' character a bit too. Like he's one of the original cowboys in the Jaeger program. Like him and Stacker came up, and like he's one of the last remaining old dogs, literally in the running, still piloting out there fighting. And I love that concept a lot. Even though he's with his asshole son, like they're going out there and like they're so experienced. Like they already have 10 kills, and that's on top of whatever. Because in the novelization, Herc and his brother were pilots, and they piloted a Jaeger called Lucky 7, and that's where when Raleigh talks about the 3-man drop they did in Manila. That was the last drop that Herc did with his brother, and I think Lucky was damaged. Like, it wasn't destroyed, but it was just damaged beyond repair. And that's when he got Stryker, and that's when him and his son started piloting and taking on, Kaiju.
Right, and you can see why it's so good, because for those who went to WonderCon this year of 2013, they gave out Pacific Rim trading cards.
Mm-hmm.
And when you looked at it, my friends and I were looking at it, and I was like, Stryker Eureka has 11 Kaiju kills, but all the other ones, and I was like, what is wrong with Americans? And then, obviously as you watch the movie, it's very easy to see why. Just because it's, better tech.
It's better tech, it's quicker, it's faster, it has the missile launch system, it's got the heat blades that come out of the side. And not only that, but just Herc being the more experienced pilot and his son being far more kind of gung-ho at, taking on monsters. They almost have that they don't care if they live or die attitude. So, like, when
Right.
you actually see Stryker for the first time, he's pretty much just wailing the shit out of the Sydney Kaiju, and they're just beating the crap out of it. And it's literally just a big brawly fist fight, like you would expect. Like the stereotype I have in my head of Australians, that they're all large, strapping men, Amazonian women. They like to have a good time, and they like to get drunk and beat the crap out of each other. Now, mind you, it's a terrible stereotype in my head, but that's what I like to romanticize Australians as. They're fun people, and they like to fight.
I was gonna say they're like the southern hemispheres of the Irish.
Pretty much, yeah.
But yeah, no, and I hear it, and they have the outback, and they're so like manly
Everything
and rugged,
there can
and
kill you, too. Like even the cats can kill you.
yes. But like, and then from there, for some reason, the Jaeger, under the concept art, they moved from Jaeger to costume.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty standard. They just showed you the blueprint of the different types of clothing that the heroes would wear, how they would costume, like, the difference between Riley when he suddenly becomes a construction worker to the pilot's outfit. But the one note that I did make is for Mako, they showed that she had 2 layers of clothing.
Mm-hmm.
Underneath, like those tight spandex things, underneath her pilot suit. And so I was like, do they all have 2 layers, or does she only have 2 layers? So when I was asking a friend, they were like, maybe it's to like reinforce her boobs, because it's like a sports bra.
Yeah.
You don't want you have an underneath layer, and then you have the regular layer on top. They go, for men, maybe they just only wear 1 layer.
Yeah, well, even
You know?
it's even a thing because I was talking to like someone who like makes armor for Renaissance fairs and stuff, and they're talking about the I'm like, hey, do you think why don't you ever see like the breastplate armor for like chicks like you see in fantasies? And pretty much the direct answer I got is like, because it wouldn't work in real life. It's like that. It pretty much is just all you're doing is strapping formed metal over you, and it's not going to provide any protection whatsoever. It's like when you look at armor, it sticks out because that's what it's there for. It's to take a blunt blow, and when you do that for women, you've just kind of given the form-fitting one. That's not blocking anything. It's like when you see Kevlar vests, they're just big, thick sheets in front, on a strap in front of you because they're there to take a blow. So it doesn't work, that way. Then again, we're also talking about plug suits like in Evangelion, and you have to stylize things a little bit, so...
Yeah, but I thought that was just an interesting note that she had 2 layers of clothing. And then for the costume section, it was pretty short and to the point. And then after that, they did environments, the concept art for the environments. And they broke them down to 3. The con pod, they pretty much just showed almost like, I believe it was in the film, when they only had 1 pilot. And they drew him that he was just kind of hanging there, Malekith style, if you just saw Thor the Dark World. Or I would say when Iron Man gets his suit put on, it's a very like it's just he's standing there starfish style but kind of hanging. But they did that originally, and it just showed 1 pilot, and that's what they had for artwork under the con pod. And then for the construction site, I was like, what kind of concept art would they show for a construction site? It's actually when Stacker Pentecost is landing in his helicopter and all the construction workers are running. And all I can see is someone putting a caption that says, Idris Elba is coming, run for it. Because the way that they drew the people, it doesn't look like they're running from the helicopters because they don't, you want to be away from the wind.
Yeah.
They're running like, they drew them like the extras had faces of fear that Idris Elba was coming for them.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was really interesting how they drew that. I don't know if it was intentional or not. And then the next part that they had done was the Shattered Dome. But the environment that they showed was during the training, not the sparring, but like kind of training with the bow staff. I could be wrong, as automatic slideshow, it didn't let me hit it manually. It would look like actually originally that Mako and Riley had wooden swords.
Yeah.
And not bow staffs.
Yeah, they probably would have been the training katanas. That actually would have honestly, that would have made more sense too.
Yeah, but for the sake of the U-boat that came later, I guess bow staffs are gonna have to be needed. And then the next part is, I guess apparently I took a break, and my DVD did not realize that. And when I came back, I saw a picture. It said Antiverse. It's A-N-T-E
Yeah.
verse, not anti-verse.
Yeah. But I think it's supposed to be
Antiverse.
pronounced like antiverse, but they wanted to give it like a unique spelling, so it could, like how sci-fi changed from sci-fi to sci-fi. So that way,
Or sci-fi.
yeah, sci-fi. So that way they could, they could lay their claim to it.
Yes, and it's an Antiverse, and it was a concept art of the head aliens, and I thought I was watching Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah.
I was like, is the DVD possessed? Did I do something?
Yeah, that was the most that was the most Del Torian aspect, I think, of the whole film.
Yes.
Because it's interesting, because I actually read the original draft that Beechman wrote on his own. That was the pitch for the film, and
Yes.
they don't go into the Antiverse that much. They do have a version of the drift sequence, but it wasn't with Newt; it was with someone else. And they kind of show you a little bit more, like he goes through the Antiverse. Pardon me. And instead of being the factory kind of like look that it is, where they're building the kaiju, it's more of like a holding pin. And the precursors, as they're called, were far more reptilian. Like they resembled the kaiju far more. To an extent that idea is kept. They're multi-limbed and everything like that. But they were more kind of like I guess the easiest way to explain were like the Gorn from the original Star Trek.
Yes, and I can see it's very Del Torian, also because much like Tim Burton, his dogs all look a certain way, like Zero and Frankenweenie. But it's kind of like their stamp on things. And then I looked on the bottom, and in the bottom of the concept art of, I would like to say, the Pan's Labyrinth looking alien mofo, it says Cardinal and his bishop. So I guess they kind of have ranks and titles. To be honest, I would have preferred Travis Beecham's way, because I feel like you should clone kind of larger versions of yourself. But I can see, since Del Toro kind of is heavily involved, if not took over the project, I can see why there's a Del Torian stamp on it.
Well, the way the original script kind of implied was the fact that the kaiju weren't bred. There was never any indication that they were bred, but they were like the native animals of that world, and pretty much like Voltron, how King Lothar would take one, and then he'd have Hager, add to it and make it grow so it could, fight Voltron. They were kind of held in a pen, and it was like this massive sea of like kaiju. They were just crawling all over each other, and they would pluck one out, and then they would send it through the rift, and it would come out. And the interesting thing about that was, you can see the ideas that Beecham had, because whenever the kaiju, would come on, when he would write the kaiju scenes, he would give them a name, and then he would give like a general description, but it was enough to where you got an idea in your head of what these things would look like. And a lot of them were way off of what Del Toro eventually had designed. They were more, there was far more variety, if you will. Like at one point, the script's they're in Lima, and one of the characters that isn't even in the film is meeting up with Newt for the first time, and they're on the beach, and a kaiju attacks. So it comes out of the water, and it's called Dengue, and it's a spider. The way they described it was it was half spider, half dragon. So it was reptilian.
Oh my god, I would have fell in love with it.
Yeah, it was reptilian in nature. It had like a big reptilian head, but it had 8 legs like a spider. It had like a body like a spider, and it had like hairs like a spider on it. But they were scaly in nature. And so when it fought, I believe the Jaeger it fights, and that's the first time you really see like a full-on Jaeger fight in the movie. It was Puma Real, I think. That's the South American Jaeger. And there's a sequence, and this was pretty much set up to show you, like, what really happens when a kaiju attacks. Like, they sound the alarm. It's like a tornado's coming. People are running and screaming. And then when Dengue comes up, like, the Jaeger falls into the ocean, tries to hold him off there, and the kaiju pushes forward. And one of its attacks is it takes one of its legs and tosses, just kind of like almost slaps the air, but you see that like this haze kind of comes off of it, and it starts hitting the Jaeger, and they start bouncing off, and when the way that the script describes it is they come closer and they start landing on the ground. They're giant barbs, like the size of javelins, and they're just plunging on the ground everywhere, and they're hitting people, and they're just impaling, and that's kind of implying to the effect that these creatures have. Yeah, and not only that, but and if I can go in a little more, the interesting thing was that there wasn't the rankings of the kaiju were all different whenever they came out. Like the first kaiju they ever attacked was a Category 5, and then they had Category 2s, Category 4s, Category 3s. There was no rhyme or reason to any of it. So and pretty much it went back to the fact that they weren't the precursors weren't making them. They were just kind of plucking them out of this holding pen that they had and threw them out there. Because later on, the big sequence is there's a 3 kaiju fight like towards the end, but it's far different. It involves Tactic Ronin, who has a major part in the film, and Gypsy, and they're fighting what I can describe as something akin to the Toho Frankenstein. It's a very humanoid-looking creature with some hair, but it's very pale. And I forgot the second one off the top of my head because I haven't read the script in a while. But the third one was a Category 5, and it was a giant Cthulhu-looking monster. The best way I could describe it is there was a series in the 80s that Hasbro had made called Inhumanoids. It was about giant. It was about these big underground creatures that came up, and they were part of an extinct race. And one of the creatures was called Leisure, I think. But pretty much he looked like a big Cthulhu man-thing looking creature that had trindle arms. And that's what this big Category 5 one was. And it spat little tiny like parasites that would explode upon impact. So that's where Travis Beachman was thinking when he was going with his kaiju compared to what we ultimately got in the film, which was a more, when they kind of developed the precursors, techniques of sending the kaiju, it makes more sense that you slowly keep building them more and more and improving upon them so that the categories get bigger and bigger.
Yes, and the categories, if you also look up online on the Pacific Rim Wikia, they are not just by size, but also the acidity and toxicity.
And the radiation they put out, too.
And the radiation of their bodies, because they're like ammonia-based creatures, or they're, different types of base creatures. That's why when you see a shot of not just the feces, but like when the workers are cleaning up, their gloves are like blue and all that stuff.
The blood's toxic. I believe they're not carbon-based, they're silicon-based. And so everything about them is just hazardous.
Yes, and that when they die, they're meant to spontaneously combust and take out people with them.
Yeah, they're built to, when I asked Beachman at Comic-Con, I'm like, because I was asking him about, why was it pregnant one? He's like, well, the precursors, the idea is, the kaiju aren't built to last. Like, they know that humanity's fighting back, so pretty much they're sent there to do as much damage as possible. That even involves after death. That's why the blood's toxic. That's why their bodies are toxic. And that's, it's like now, if they kill one, they send them pregnant now. So, excuse me, maybe the little one can escape and go undetected, grow, and then, they would never see it coming because it wouldn't come out through the breach. So they're pretty much sending, like shoe bombs, if you will, into with the kaiju now. So they're getting smarter and craftier about how they're delivering their bombs.
Right. And I think that was really interesting, the difference between how the original writer kind of thought. To be honest, yes, shooting acid out of its mouth is a lot scarier, but shooting little parasites that fly out that is way more terrifying because insects will just fly anywhere. At least with acid, it's kind of a stream that you can dodge.
Yeah, the original script had a lot of great ideas, but it wasn't a perfect film if it was shot that way. There was and to be honest, Del Toro improved a lot on that, just story-wise. when he came in to collaborate with Beachman. In the original draft, it was Mako and Raleigh did like there was a romance arc between them, and I'm glad that that got kicked out because it works much better on screen if they just had like this nice mutual respect. It was refreshing not to see the played out romance angle between a man and a woman.
Exactly, and it's hinted.
It's
you know,
hinted,
if,
like,
if you know, you know. If you don't, it doesn't change the story.
Exactly, but there was a bit more like the Jaeger program wasn't at the end when in the original draft. Like they were still going strong. The problem was they were starting to lose, and they were losing pilots, and they made a big deal about the fact that the drift compatibility was you had to either be related or married or something within there had to be a very close bond. And so the idea in original draft was that Raleigh was his brother still died. They died defending LA from a giant turtle kaiju called Tortuga, and in the original draft the con pods were separate. They were like two different con pods that were inside the chest, so they weren't inside the head.
Right.
So Tortuga had a spear attack that came out of its mouth, and it speared the chest of and here's another cool little thing. They didn't originally pilot Gypsy. They piloted Coyote Tango, or Tango Coyote.
Yes.
So,
I believe it's Coyote Tango.
Yes. So they piloted that mech, and Tortuga speared Yancey's side, killing Yancey, and that's Raleigh still. He had his Evangelion moment where he lost it, and pretty much his mind took over the entire kaiju, and he literally beat the kaiju to death. Like it was literally that scene from the first episode of Evangelion when the Eva goes berserk and just tears apart the angel. It was almost verbatim that scene, but done with a Jaeger and a kaiju instead, and in front of the Santa Monica Pier.
Tortuga would have also been another favorite of mine had it made it onto the screen.
Yeah, he had a trifected mouth, so like his jaw opened at two different ends, kind of like the Predator jaw.
Yeah. And for the rest of the environments, concept art, the anti-kaiju refuge looked exactly like it did on paper as it did on screen. And what I found was kind of cute was the propaganda posters. Very retro 40s style, and it's pictures of the Jaegers saying, bring us to victory, or this is victory. And then they'll have pictures of fallen kaiju, and it says, help us to get rid of, and it's always this mad brute.
Yeah.
And so, for fun, I was thinking, if the Antiverse had propaganda posters against us, I've always wondered what they would say and look like.
I think there's fan art for that out there. I know I saw something like that on 4chan where they retweet the sequence of when they're testing out the Jaeger arm for the first time, when they're testing the drift stuff. There's literally a point where they have like one of the aliens, the precursors, with like a device around its arm, and then you see a kaiju hand in the background doing the clasp motion. So there was something like that, but I know I've seen human propaganda posters for the precursors. You're gonna have to go look them up. I'll see if I can find something to put in the show notes, though.
Right. No, that would be great, and we can put like attach pictures, maybe to the podcast, and you guys could look. So that was it for everything under Shatterdome, and the last two that we're gonna go through, because that's all they have in the special features, is the first part is. And I really liked it. I believe there's a book that also came out recently, but it's a director's digital notebook. And recently Del Toro also has a printed version of just all the notes that he's done, or like what goes on in his brain. It's like Del Toro's hidden notebook. Like just look it up on Amazon. We'll probably attach a link to this podcast. But it's I'm always interested to know what certain directors are thinking. And J.K. Rowling sketched out Harry Potter on napkins and other things, and you hear, writers say, when I get an idea, I just kind of sketch it out, even if it's on a bed sheet, I write it out, but it's an entire notebook of Del Toro's things, from all his thoughts, from all, for years and years of his life, but for the sake of Pacific Rim, it's just a digital notebook version of Pacific Rim itself, and as you went through it, you can flip the book pages, digital pages, and you can either get videos or pictures or just little notes. And I think what I thought was so cute, for lack of a better term, was everything's in Spanish. So when it translates, it'll do when you hit zoom, there'll be subtitles on the bottom.
Yeah. Well, it is his
Everything
native tongue.
is written. It is his native tongue. Everything's in Spanish. And I just thought like, oh, that's really interesting because it's a Western film. We know he has an accent. We know he's from Mexico, but to me, I just assume that a Notebook should be in English.
That's your terrible Western thinking right there.
I know.
See,
It's my
I was saying it, then it was
terrible
just like, oh, you're racist, but it's like, no, Jessica, you should know better.
Exactly. Like my mother's diary. I mean, I can't read it, but my mother's diary she speaks English fine. She's great, but she writes all in Chinese because it's quicker. It's your first native language. But I love how everything was written in Spanish, and I was like, oh, I don't know why I didn't think of that. But next, he went into how he thought the scavengers would look like, which is Ron Perlman's people that went into. They took it, and the way he sketched it, and you have to understand this is like a very I would say pre-production. But they look like Tusken Raiders, the Sand People from Star Wars, with Chinese rice hats.
Yeah, and there's a very steampunk vibe to them too, as well. They're real goggle heavy. There's a huge breathing apparatus over their face. Like there's none of their face is shown, and with the coolies on, with the breathing apparatus, they do look like Tusken Raiders if they moved to China.
Exactly. I'm like, really? I like the rice hats, so it's a nice touch.
And he does explain in that, it's like, look, we had these really elaborate, outfits, but then as the movie progressed and he wanted to keep everything under budget, the outfits kind of went away to more just standard, they kept the coolies, but they pretty much were just working, with their bare hands. Like the biohazard suits that the guys are wearing when they're walking through the kaiju brain, those are far more elaborate. And then he's just like, yeah, we didn't have it in the budget, so now they're just wearing these big, biosuits that we could have just gotten from any prop department. It's like, that it's one of those concessions you make when you're trying to get other things you want to get done in the movie that are going to cost more money.
Right. But I think there was a slight consolation prize for him, because if you look at the Russian pilots, they kind of have that Sand People goggle look.
Yeah, they do.
On top of their thing. I mean, not really, the scavengers ended up looking more like, people in biohazard suits, Breaking Bad style. Yeah. But, he got to kind of put his idea into a different character. What I love is Del Toro's sense of detail. Because there's something he wrote in Spanish, and the translation was, even the kaiju's poop must be amazing. Yeah. And as you can tell, for one of the early kind of marketing, schemes for Pacific Rim is we got to see news footage. And one of them was all of its excrements. Yeah. And everything. Like, even Ron Perlman's character says, Cannibal Chow, like even its feces can go.
A pound of crap has enough phosphorus to fertilize, like, a whole field.
Exactly. And I think it's just amazing that I was like, this is a director, people, that you have to really respect, because he even thinks about fictional characters' poo. And I thought that was great. And as they saw, and then the next video is him drawing or writing. He uses a fountain pen. And I really like that touch to just Del Toro's personality.
It's got that gothic sentimentality to it. Like, definitely, if he was a kid growing up today, he would be the rare non-white goth kid, I believe. But not so much in the I hate the world kind of tone, but he'd be dressing very, he would have some Morrissey outfit on, but he'd have his notebook would just be filled with monster movies and shit like that, but it'd be all in black, and he'd be writing everything with fancy pens and shit like that, just that added little touch. And I think his hair would be dyed black as well.
Really? That's how you would say. I was like, you know what? If you do a fountain pen, you gotta go down to a quill. Yeah. I gotta see you start writing in a quill with orange ink.
And then with the fountain pen, with the quill, you get the automatic narration. Everyone can hear what you're writing in your head.
Yes, the scratching, the scritching sound. And the next video, like, he went into such detail. I did not notice this, but it's when Pentecost first confronts Riley after being, quote unquote hiding out in the construction site or whatever. He sits on like a 3-ringed half pipe. And Del Toro says it's because I've been, really doing research into like pipes and underground sewers and stuff. And I was thinking like, sir, what are you doing in your free time? And he says, if you ever undo a pipe, you get to see the 3 rings that are inside. And the rings, I feel like, and he went into this whole thing about the symbolism of the rings and what it symbolizes and who Riley is. But then he also said that I wanted it to be a half pipe, kind of broken, because it symbolizes who Riley is. And when Riley sits there, it's kind of like a dude on a throne.
Oh yeah, well it's like the shoe represents Mako's heart. Like she's literally,
Yes.
'cause you see where she's holding it too. She's holding it up to like where her heart would be. So yeah,
Yes.
there's a ton of symbolism that goes over 90% of the audience's heads because
Of
they just
course,
don't pick
of
it up.
course.
And if you're like a film geek, you're picking. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I get what that means. And if you're one of those uppity film geeks, you're overly digesting. It's like, well, this has even deeper meaning. It's like, no, that's just he's just saying that's what this is. Don't read too much into it.
Right. No, and it was like the Tumblr from Batman, the Nolan universe. It looks like that on the outside because it's supposed to symbolize Bruce Wayne's tortured soul. And I was thinking, 90% of people will not know. They will either like it or be like, God damn, that is ugly. So, but I do like the touches, and as you guys all know, it's what the special features DVD is for. Or novelizations or behind the scene books. It's to help us better understand the film. And something that I loved and they only touched upon is when Hannibal Chow, Ron Perlman, was talking about, look at these people. It's like they worship the kaiju from the gods and all that stuff. Del Toro, in his video, in the digital notebook, said had they have a bigger budget, he would have shown the temple inside and more outside. And that because these bones fall, they're not all able to be moved.
No, because they're the size of
they're
skyscrapers. They're pretty much, yeah.
Exactly. So people start building their towns around them, or in that case in Hong Kong, a temple is built inside of the skull of the kaiju. And he even goes as far to say, yeah, I didn't want the entrance to be the mouth. I wanted the entrance to be through the nose. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And he goes, just because if it's this and this and this character, and then like he went into the whole symbolization of the nose as opposed to entering through the mouth, and I was like, holy cow, I wish he had a bigger budget.
Well, if you're talking about detail, when they get that shot of the worshippers going into the temple, when you see him ascending the stairs, you notice the stairs are carved out of the skull. So there's that whole intricacy of the banister that's completely. It's all carved out of the ivory of the bones. It's much like how I was pointing out to my buddy when Raleigh's fighting Mako. It's like most people missed it until I started pointing out because like the second time I was watching, I noticed it. The arm that on Gypsy that gets torn off by Knifehead. You remember the suit kind of goes nuts and Raleigh starts feeling it, which is the only thing that really I was questioning because. They don't play up on it too much later on. The whole, you feel what the Jaeger feels because you're connected to it.
Yeah.
But if you notice that the suit left all these scars burned into his arm, so it's literally where the circuitry was running. That you could see all the circuitry mark. Like it looks like he's got like a Tron arm going on, because they're even like there's a slight yellow tinge to him as well. But it's so minute that you never notice it.
Yes, and that's something that we'll cover also over under the focus points of the actual DVD movie, because there's a scene of Idris Elba, and he's shirtless, but he has all these scars from the circuitry from his suit. But obviously that would be for later. And I think it's all the intricate details. And with all its intricacy, though, Del Toro's next video was saying, in the end, I wanted a simple story. One that you can just follow. And he says, this is a movie about robots and, monsters. And he goes, and his example that he uses in the video is like the Russians. They have all but 7 lines. But what they say or what's described about them, that's all you need to know.
You know what? And that when I heard that, I'm just like, yes, thank you, because that's the one thing I heard most people who poo-pooed this movie, they were bitching about. They were bitching about how they were like the characters were stereotyped and like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, and these characters are doing that. It's like, look, just because something is complicated does not mean it's smart or it's good.
Exactly.
Stereotypes is a stereotype is a double-edged sword. It can be very negative, but it can also be positive, because when you're talking about stereotypes, people put stereotypes in the aspect of of like, hey, all Asians are good at math. That's a stereotype. But
yes.
Stereotype,
and I will accept that
yes,
stereotype,
exactly.
even though I'm not that good at math. But that's a positive stereotype.
It's a positive stereotype. But because cultures have aspects to them, and that's all invoked into a stereotype. When you think of a Russian, you're thinking of like these burly, kind of straight face, almost dour people, but they walk with a sense of meaning, and they're very heavily coated. They're all very large and burly, and you get that from the Russian crew when they're walking. Like just how they compose themselves, and they have almost that Russian look to them. Like Russians do have a certain look. It's there's the saying, like when people point out, like when people like to point out when they're thinking someone's being racist, like, oh, you think we all look the same. It goes with white people too. Like you think all white people look the same. It's like, no, there's certain tinges to every ethnicity, and your greater North American white, as I like to call us. We have like we have like a little more rounder face and stuff like that. When you look at Australians, they're far more chiseled, they're cut, but they also have like maybe like when they get older, they age a little bit differently, and it just might be the atmosphere that they're in. Like they tend to kind of wrinkle up a little bit more. Russians, on that hand, are very, for the most part, they're stocky, but they're built like almost like machines themselves, which ironically symbolize their country for so many years. Every country, every culture has a certain look, because it's, in a way, it's almost Darwinism, because everything, genetics are a product of their environment. And where people are coming up, and especially how we, as we create a society, we influence our environment. That's what goes into it, and that's what creates a stereotype. So with Del Toro saying, hey, look, we have these characters, we don't spend much time with them, but I want to convey what they are, and that's part of the visual medium of filmmaking. Is you're visually conveying things to people. So when you have to sit there and have a character have a 20-minute dialogue so you can understand him, that in a way is almost lazy filmmaking, because you're not letting the audience learn for themselves. You're spoon feeding it to them, and just having the basic generalization of certain characters like the Russians and the Chinese. It's like, okay, you get it, they're Asian. They have, the Chinese have the red on them, but they're small, they're agile, they're quick. That's why their Jaeger has, worked for as long as it did. The Russians, they're big, burly, and they're like a walking wall. That works. They never have to sit there and explain exactly what these people are. You just know they're Jaeger pilots, they represent their respective countries, and then they do what they need to do. And that's...
Yes, and it's really straightforward. Mm-hmm. There's not too many, like, B, C, D storylines.
Exactly.
You just, it's just straightforward, to the point. You know what's happening.
Ironic, and you know what? Another movie that got critically praised by everyone that does the exact same thing that Pacific Rim does, that everyone loved. They're like, oh my god, it's great. That relies on that same simplicity and almost no character development, was Gravity. Gravity was all visual, and even had the same, technical flaws that Pacific Rim had. But people gravitated, ironically, for a better word, gravitated towards that movie because they're like, oh, well, they're in space. This could really happen. There's this sense of danger. And Gravity, mind you, was a beautiful film. It had great moments of suspense. It really built. It was almost a one-take film. But honestly, if you know your astrophysics, for a better term, a lot of that stuff could never happen. Like George Clooney could not, take.
Yeah.
They couldn't go, 100 miles through space on that tiny little gas, jetpack that they had to get to the International Space Station. There's that same amount, but people were more, especially like real hardcore film nerds, were more willing to forgive that because a director that I guess they have more respect for than Guillermo del Toro did it. And they look at Del Toro as like, oh, he's the guy that makes the monster movies, so, and all this is doing is copping off Godzilla, so we'll poo-poo that, for its, simple storyline. But we'll look at this and like, oh my God, it's great, in terms of gravity. Point I'm trying to make, and I will stop rambling.
Right. Oh, no, and it's really, really true about what you said, with all its intricate detail of the kaiju and the Jaegers and the stories and who Mako was, like 20th generation Blade Maker was her dad. Like, you wanted a simple story, and that if people wanted to know more things, they will look into it.
Exactly. It's called getting off your ass and, learning on your own, which is something I really...
Yes.
It's kind of a lost art, but, that's how you grow as a person. You pick up a book, you read, you figure it out for yourself instead of having it just force-fed to you.
Right. And exactly. And with the next part is he talked about in the notebook that the colors change of the clothing to reflect the growth of the character. He was saying how, like, in the beginning, Riley had more, like, greens and blues or something, and as the film changed. I didn't notice that because everything looked like apocalyptic, like, simple, like, thing. But, after you point it out, it makes kind of sense. Because, there are such things as warm colors and light colors. They're saying, like, Mako is mostly blue, hence the blue in her hair. Riley is green, so, like, red. And, they talked about that. And then they talked about how when Mako and Riley really connected was when they were sitting in front of Gypsy Danger eating lunch. Because, no one wants to eat lunch. They're those people in high school, sadly. And then you get to see the heart exposed of Gypsy Danger. And then that's, the whole romantic, oh, their hearts are combining, it's being fixed, and they're, only two people so tragic can really, really find love and get to know each other. That part I did notice in the film, not the clothes part, but definitely that part in the film. Because I heard some girl behind me go, aww. So, like, I knew it. I was like, okay, so what I'm thinking is not wrong during the film. But, no, I mean, that was pretty much a lot of the highlights I loved in the digital notebook. And then the last thing on the special features DVD is the digital artistry. And the digital artistry is just a straight, it was like a 10, 11-minute video of the visual effects first meeting that Del Toro had with the people. And the second visual effects meeting that, he had with the people. And it's just the process of how precise he is. But it shows that it started, like, since October 2011. And this film didn't come out till this year. And, one of the, like, in the little kind of pre-trailers not pre-trailer, it's like before the timestamp of, it says visual effects meeting 1, October 2011. They show several clips of what was happening before. And if you pause, you can see all the different Jaegers that are behind Del Toro's head when he's sitting in this meeting. And, one of them is... And I also believe that the names was not originally the country that he also matched them with, because Tactic Ronin had the word Sydney underneath. Yeah,
well,
and then something Alpha said Hong Kong, Romeo Blue also said Sydney, and Coyote Tango said Japan. So I'm beginning to wonder if it's a different country or those are just location marks of where he wants the Jaegers to be.
Well, I think originally because I believe the book kind of went into this a little bit, and I'm just going off what I read online, was the fact because they really don't play up to the fact that, like, Europe really had anything to do with it, but it turns out that a lot of the Jaeger tech was developed by Germans. So
that makes sense. I mean, because the guy's name is Hermes Gutla, or Gutla. I apologize, you guys. I cannot say his name. But I like to say Squirrely Friend.
Yeah.
But Goaty is, as you saw, is the son of the original Jaeger programmer. And he had an accent when he talks to Newton. So it makes sense now that you said that Germany / Europe.
It was the Jaegers were developed, I think, in Germany, by the Pan Pacific Corp, and they weren't like I think the idea that people have was each country got to build their own. It's like no. The Pan Defense Corps built the Jaeger, and then they would assign them a country to defend. Pretty much, like you're a soldier being put into post. So,
Right.
so pretty much, they once they were sent to that particular country, they would stay there. And I think a couple of them actually got moved around. Like I believe Coyote Tango originally was in China, but then they moved it to Japan because I think it was a matter of what was getting attacked more at the time. And that's where they're placing the Jaegers.
But I always liked the fact that the names reflected something about the country.
Yeah, well, it's like I believe like Yukon Brawler. Obviously, that's a Canadian, Jaeger.
Yes.
But it was it was originally supposed to be an American Jaeger. It was originally supposed to be based out of Alaska. So I think it came down to the Jaegers weren't named until they were placed at the location they were supposed to be at. So kind of like christening a battleship after a president. It's like, okay, what president just died that we can name this battleship after? Okay, well here we'll give Reagan his own battleship now. So I think it's that concept.
True.
Yeah.
True. But also Jaegers are built to kind of reflect their country too. So that means that they must know at least what country they're going to ship it off to.
Yeah, well, it could be that. I think a little bit of that is as well. It's like, okay, well, Japan needs this many, so we're going to build them there, ship them off there. But, like, well, hold on, let's keep this one. We'll send Japan 2 right now, and this one was originally meant for Japan. We'll send it to South America because they need one right now. It's that kind of idea where it was, we need to get defenses up. It's like a good strategy game where as you're building your resources, you got to get your defense. The first thing you got to do is get your defense up before you can get a good offense. So, it's a matter of what you have built already and what gets to go where. That's just what I'm going off of what I read. There could be like a whole nother reason for it that Beachman has for it, but I do know that a couple of the Jaegers did get moved around. I think Coyote Tango was one of them.
Okay, because I noticed that they looked a certain country, but it had a completely different country's name attached to it. So for those who are watching that DVD special, if you guys, find a screenshot of it, or if you guys cannot buy all the books and supplemental material, if you pause it, if you look behind Del Toro's head, you get to see all the different ones, and they're really interesting. And then they move on the video to his second visual effects meeting, and I cannot emphasize it enough. Like, I love how detailed Del Toro is and how precise. Because he talked about, and the way he talks is also so funny. He was like, and imagine the way I'm speaking and the way Del Toro would speak. But Guillermo was basically saying, we need to give the background actors something to do. Because it's like those kung fu movies where the main two characters are fighting, but everyone else in the background is standing there looking in the sky, reading a book. So he was like, when they're fighting, the background actors, give them something to do. Keep them busy. Make them look like they're actually doing something. And I like that about, most people don't think that, because I don't always pay attention to the background actors, because, my eyes are in the main focus. But background actors are actually pretty important to the scenes. Like when people are yelling, in a diner scene of How I Met Your Mother, you see everyone else in the restaurant turn around and have, face expressions. So I think that's something that Del Toro did a really great job. And I love the fact that he talked about how the eyes of every single kaiju are different. And he was telling some, a lady that worked there, like, yes, I understand they all look, reptilian or big or whatever, but the eyes are all going to be different. Like a salamander's eyes is different from a turtle's eye, which is different. And then there's a screenshot of just all these different eyes.
One's got the thin slit iris, one's got a big round iris. They're all unique snowflakes in their own way.
It is. And for those who don't know, one of my bachelor's degree was in zoology. And to be honest, I didn't even notice this. But he was saying, so he was looking at someone's computer, and he was, had a touch screen, he had a stylus, and he goes, Otachi right here, and it's a picture of Otachi with her wings out, or its wings out, and he goes, you you need bones right here.
Yeah, they want to put the
And
pterodactyl bone, like where the extended finger would be for the wingspan.
Yeah. And he was like, you need bones right here. And he goes into this whole, you would think he's a veterinarian. Then he goes into this whole thing like, have you ever seen bats fly? Or something like that. Like, if it flew, it would just tear apart. So it needs like a wing here, like it needs a bone here and a claw there. And I was like, oh my God, he puts me to shame and I have a degree in it. Like that didn't even register in my mind because I was so busy with other focuses of the film. But he puts in such detail to, let's be honest, 99% of the audience does not give a crap if there's an extra bone in Otachi's wings. All they care is that it flew up and it got sliced by an awesome sword. So I really, really liked that. And, you know, down to the last detail is he was talking about how when Leatherback gets onto land and he's more like a gorilla kind of moving, he goes and he steps over onto the loading dock and his knuckles like crush into the shipping crates. And he was like, as you can tell, it's belly, and then like he paused and like circles the belly of Leatherback. He goes, it moves different. The way it moves onto the loading dock needs to be a lot more heavy. He goes, as you can tell with me, and then he points to himself, my wife can tell you when I step out of the tub and I'm moving and I'm heavy. And I just thought like it takes a lot in a person to not really see that detail, but to poke fun of yourself in a lighthearted way. And he was like, no, the belly needs to move like this, and the way he gets onto the dock is like the way I would get out of a tub, you know? And he went into this whole detail, and you can see like everyone's just kind of sitting there with a, how do I respond? Yeah. If I agree, does it make it seem like I think he has a weight issue? Or if I don't agree, does it mean I don't think his detail's right?
Well, here's a secret. Being a large man myself, every fat guy knows he's a fat guy. So we've learned to poke fun at ourselves. We know our shortcomings. Like, we are not Adonises. We do not have, you know, great bodies. We don't have what they call beach water park bodies. So, you know, we see the shame when we walk out, and we're like, okay, well, we got to roll with the punches.
Oh no! But I've always wondered if Del Toro's gonna pull a Peter Jackson. Because I thought to myself, if this man has any health issues and is suddenly taken from us to the Pan's Labyrinth of all heavens, I'm going to be really upset.
Yeah. No, I think he's fine. He's lost weight, he's gained weight. Like, he's down from what he used to be. Like, when I met him, I got a picture of a thin, in-shape me from my senior year of high school when I met him at the LA Comic Convention, and he was very big back then. I would say he was tipping the scales at least 360 easily back then. Like, he was a big boy. Like, he's definitely gone down since then.
But it's the teddy bear feel. I like it.
Yes, he still has it. Like, when I met him 2 years ago, right before he went for production of Pacific Rim, like, he was much thinner, but he's still a big boy. So, you know, he's getting to that age, and I know for a fact Peter Jackson, he's put back on a lot of that weight that he lost. But a lot of that weight...
Has he?
He's not pre-Lord of the Rings fat, but he's got some chub back on him. And I know for a fact that the end of Lord of the Rings to King Kong, a lot of that weight loss was like stress weight that he lost. That was just him just like...
Oh, no!
Yeah, that was him like, I can't eat because I can't sleep because I'm just working myself to death. That's why he's gained a lot of that back, because now like he had time to kind of calm down. He filmed a couple of other movies. I wouldn't doubt that The Hobbit might take a little bit out of him, but we'll see what he does after he's done with the Hobbit films. You know, see if he jumps into something, if he's learned his lesson.
Right. But no, I mean, I just thought like the whole like teddy, because I saw him as more of a teddy bear, like a loving teddy bear. But the fact that he compared himself to like the physical movements of Leatherback. I was like, oh, dude, don't do that to yourself. But he said it with, like, a joy on his face. I was like, I like him as a person and as a director.
Humble. He's a very humble man.
Yes, and I thought that was so great. But no, I mean, that's all the notes I have on Del Toro. But no, that's what we loved about the special features is you got to really kind of get into his mind. Not really Travis Beacham's mind.
No, which he was surprisingly absent from this disc.
He was, and as we go into part 2 or 3 of this podcast, however our lovely Chris would like to edit it, you only saw Travis for all of like 3 times on the actual movie DVD special features. Not the special features disc, but like we barely saw him, and I think it's like he had to take a back seat and make it a Del Toro show.
That probably just down to what the producers of the DVD wanted. Because a lot of people, like, before the movie came out, like, the Beastman was pretty front and center about, you know, he being the originator of the concept of Pacific Rim, and then, you know, Del Toro coming in, putting his touches on it. But, you know, the Jaeger, the Kaiju, all that's all Beachman's, you know, concept. That's all of his doing. And, you know, the finer brushes were all done by Del Toro, so... You know, it's saying a lot that they completely ditched him, but it also goes with an adage that the writer always gets the short end of the stick when it comes to the final product of the film. Even though ironically they are mostly the core reason why the film exists.
Yes, that was. I mean, as amazing as Del Toro is, Del Toro was approached by Beachman's project.
Yes, Legendary really wanted him. Like they were waiting. Like, he was going to be originally just a producer on the film, which I could only imagine who they would have found to direct this movie before. Like, the mind boggles. But, you know, it was a matter of, as he even said, it's like, because Thomas Tull had just been working on him to do something, and they wanted him to do Pacific Rim, so he told him, it's like, I'm going to learn from Universal Friday whether or not I get to move forward with At the Mountains of Madness. If I don't, I'll be there Monday morning to sign the contract. Literally Friday night at like 6 o'clock, he got the word, we're passing. Monday morning at 8 a.m., he was in the offices of Legendary signing the contract to do Pacific Rim.
That would be, that's really awesome. And I'm glad that Del Toro got, you know, involved. But I would also love to see, if I had a future dream, a special, you know, dream project, a special features of what was going on in Travis's mind. You know, I would love to see that because, you know, that little parasite shooting on your mouth is my worst nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
Worse than the acid. Worse than the acid.
Yeah, and he does describe the Jaegers in detail, too, and Gypsy was far different than what was, you know, finally conceived. Like, it had more of, like, a build akin to Crimson Typhoon. Not with the 3 arms, but just the way the legs were, like the back, you know, the chicken legs, the way it hunched, all that. That's how a lot of Gypsy was. And Tactic Ronin, the Jaeger you briefly see in the news footage, the Japanese one, played a big role, and it was far more humanoid in the script. It actually had a beam sword too. Like it had it wasn't exactly like a lightsaber, but it was like a piece of metal that heated up. And it was able to, you know, they used it to cut through Kaiju. It actually killed 2 of them in, like, the main battle that way before it, but the problem was, though, it sucked up, like, the reserve power of it, of the Jaeger. So, I mean, it's interesting. There was a lot, like I said, there was a lot interesting. We're gonna have to, like, sit down one day and, like, do, like, a whole podcast based around the original draft, because there's many, many interesting differences, and I love kind of dissecting, you know, the germ, the seed of a film to the final product is, and there's always wonderful little bits that get left behind. That's like, if only they left that in.
Right. No, I know completely what you mean. But I mean, so far for everyone listening, that's what we have to say on the Special Features DVD. If you guys have anything to add, or hopefully not blast us with, like, I can't believe you forgot the name of that actor. Comment below.
Yes, comment below. If you know you have lasted these 2 hours and 15 minutes so far through this part 1, mind you. Yes, please let us know what how we're doing. That's gonna bring us to the end of this particular episode. Do stay tuned for part 2. We'll be up about a week after this one, where we go into more of the DVD. Believe me, we ain't done. We've only scratched the surface, shockingly. So, Jessica, where can they find your work this week?
Oh, yes. You can find me on thecomicbookgirl.com and girlongeek.com. And there is a section on girlongeek.com that is also about my love with kaiju and mecha and robots and everything of all the related source. You'll see my rantings and ravings for the new RoboCop to like everything else
That's
related.
another one I want to get you on my podcast for because RoboCop's one of my all-time favorite films. So.
Oh yes, yes, and then of course, where can we find you, Chris?
I am the co-editor of the Realmcast.com. I do run the site, the hosting site for this podcast, PanzerCrush.com, which I have just restarted after a year's hiatus. That site covers a lot more of more odder stuff that you won't find like on Realmcast, where we cover a lot more pop culture stuff. It's an odd mixture, but I hope you do. If you come to Panzer to download, just peep your head in there. You might find something interesting. I do 3 podcasts, this is my 3rd. So I do 2 other podcasts on the Realmcast, the main Realmcast podcast. Take 2 with George, my co-editor. And you can also find us online at therealmcast.com, as I said, on Twitter at therealmcast.com, and we're also on Facebook. And that note, you can also find the Kaiju Kingdom podcast. We've been going on a long time, people. The Kaiju Kingdom podcast on Facebook, and you can also find us on Tumblr. Jessica, where can you find us on Tumblr?
It's the Kaiju Kingdom podcast.tumblr.com. You can also Twitter us, and thank you to Twitter only allows so long of a username. We are the Kaiju Kingdom.
Okay.
No podcast at the end of that word. And our email, if you really want to stalk us and send us angry things but not post it publicly or in a private message, we are the Kaiju Kingdom podcast at gmail.com.
All right. Well, that will do it for us for this week. Again, stay tuned for the next episode where we will continue to dive into the Pacific Rim Disc. And just remember, Monster Island isn't actually an island. It's actually a peninsula. See you next time.